Marcus Ellison was 37 years old the night before his wedding when he saw Kendrick Ashby's car pull into his driveway at 11:43. He had been standing at his kitchen window in the dark, a glass of water in his hand, doing the thing he always did before something that mattered. Standing still, breathing deliberately, taking inventory of whatever lay ahead. His wedding was in 13 hours. 212 guests. A venue in the Dilworth neighborhood he had helped select for the quality of its afternoon light and the soundness of its original timber framing. He had paid for it entirely, the way he paid for everything, quietly, without announcement, without asking anything in return. He had no reason to wonder about the headlights sweeping across his kitchen wall. None, except the fact that Kendrick had texted him 40 minutes ago from what he said was the hotel bar, a message full of capital letters and the specific warmth of a man performing goodwill for an audience that existed only in his own mind. The lights moved, and Marcus went still, and he watched the silver Range Rover sit in his driveway with its engine running for 22 seconds before the driver's door opened. He recognized the car. He recognized the way Kendrick walked. He set his water glass on the counter without sound. He did not call out. He did not move toward the door. Instead, he did the thing his entire career had trained him to do. He observed, and he waited, and he began to build a record. What he found in the next 6 minutes would change every calculation he had made about the following morning. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Marcus Ellison had grown up in the West Boulevard corridor of Charlotte, in a house his mother kept with the precision of a woman who understood that order was the only form of control reliably available to her. She was a nurse. She worked double shifts on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and came home carrying the particular exhaustion of a woman who had spent 12 hours being responsible for other people's lives, and now had to be responsible for one more. She had a phrase she used when Marcus was young and running his mouth about something that hadn't gone his way. She would look at him over whatever she was doing and say, without stopping, "A bridge doesn't argue with the river, Marcus. It just holds." He had not fully understood it until he was 24 years old and standing on a job site in a January rain, watching a load distribution problem reveal itself in exactly the place where the math had always said the stress would live. He understood it completely then. He never forgot it after. She had been gone 9 years now. He still heard her in the quiet of rooms that required him to be still. He was a civil engineer. Infrastructure, primarily, bridges, grade separations, the hidden mathematics of how weight moves through a structure and finds the ground. No one photographed his work for magazines. No one wrote about the elegance of a properly engineered expansion joint. But the work held. 17 years into his career, he had never had a structure fail. He intended to keep that record in both the professional and the personal sense, though he understood now that those two things were not as separate as he had once believed. He lived in Druid Hills, in a craftsman bungalow on Rosewood Avenue he had bought 6 years ago and spent 2 renovating himself, weekends and evenings, methodical and unhurried. He had retiled the kitchen floor by hand. He had rebuilt the back porch from the subframe up, kiln-dried Douglas fir, each board set level, the grain running the same direction, the gaps even. The porch was the thing visitors mentioned most. He never explained how long it had taken. That was not the point of it. The point was that when he built something, it held. He had met Simone Vance at a municipal infrastructure luncheon 3 years and 8 months ago. She was running the event, which meant she was everywhere at once and nowhere in particular, a quality Marcus noticed and immediately respected. She was precise in the way he was precise. She wanted things, and she understood that wanting without planning was only wishing. The conversation that evening went 40 minutes longer than either of them had planned, and that was how he knew something real had happened. There was a flashback he would always return to from those early months. The two of them in his truck on a Sunday, hardware store run for deck lumber, arguing cheerfully about load-bearing capacity as a metaphor for romantic commitment, and Simone laughing and saying, "Marcus Ellison, you are the only man alive who makes engineering sound like love poetry." He had filed that away as evidence of the right kind of fit. He had been right about the fit. He had been wrong about other things. Kendrick Ashby had been his friend since their sophomore year at Johnson C. Smith. 14 years of trust, built through 2 job changes, one grief, a cross-country move, and the 1,000 small moments that constitute a life. Kendrick was in real estate development now, and he was good at it in the way of a man who was very good at rooms. He read people. He understood momentum. He knew when to push and when to wait. Marcus had always believed those qualities made Kendrick a good businessman. He had never once thought to consider what else they might be useful for. The night before the wedding, Kendrick had been at the rehearsal dinner, arm around Marcus's shoulder, the warmth of a man performing brotherhood for a room that believed him. He'd said, "Tomorrow we make history. Brother," Marcus had said, "get some sleep." Kendrick had grinned. "Hotel bar calls my name. I'll be in bed by midnight. Easy." He walked away toward a rideshare he had apparently already called. Marcus had driven home the long way, the city's amber street lamps reflecting off the surface of the bridge over Moorhead, the skyline he had spent 17 years building within. He had been home for 20 minutes, standing at the kitchen window in the dark, when the headlights turned into his driveway. The car sat, engine running. 22 seconds of idling that did not resolve itself into the normal sequence of someone dropping something off and ringing the bell. 22 seconds of a man deciding something. Then the driver's door opened. Kendrick stepped out and moved with the particular ease of a man who had been to this house many times, which he had, and which was why that ease, at this hour, read differently than it ever had before. Marcus watched him cross the driveway, not toward the front door, but toward the side gate. The gate to the back porch. The gate with a key code that Simone knew. That only Simone knew, because Marcus had given it to her alone. The gate opened. He heard it from the kitchen, the soft, specific sound of a well-fitted gate on level hinges. He had set those hinges himself. Marcus breathed once, slow and deliberate, and moved toward the back of the house. The back porch light was off. The curtains on the French doors to the sunroom were half drawn. Through the gap, warm light moved from the interior, and in that light, 2 shapes. Marcus positioned himself where the doorframe's shadow covered him completely. One shape was Simone's. He knew her silhouette the way he knew the roofline of his own house. The particular set of her shoulders, the way she stood with her weight slightly forward when she was at ease. She was in the green cardigan she wore on evenings she considered private, the one with the frayed left cuff she had never gotten around to replacing. Her hands were around a mug. She was glowing in the way of a woman entirely comfortable with where she is and with whom she is. Kendrick was pouring himself something from the bar cart, Marcus's bourbon, moving through the house with the unhurried ease of a man who had navigated it dozens of times and stopped needing to think about where things were. He carried his glass to the couch by the windows and sat close enough to Simone that the distance between them had a name. Marcus pulled out his phone, brightness to its lowest setting. Camera open. Every sound off. He held it through the gap in the curtain frame at the angle he calculated would capture the room and pressed record. What he captured in the next 4 minutes and 17 seconds did not require interpretation. Kendrick kissed her first. She turned toward him the way a person turns toward something familiar. He said something low that Marcus couldn't fully catch through the glass, and she laughed, quiet and private. The particular laugh of two people who have been private together long enough to stop counting. Then she said, clearly enough for Marcus to hear every word, "One more day and we don't have to do any of this anymore." Kendrick said, "After tomorrow, we're free." She said, "We've been doing this for 16 months, Ken. I think we can survive one morning." Marcus stopped recording. He backed away from the door. His shoes made no sound on the boards he had set himself, grain running the same direction, gaps even. He moved through the interior of the house to his study, closed the door and stood with his back against it for 11 seconds. He gave those 11 seconds exactly what they required. Then he sat at his desk and uploaded the footage. First cloud account. Second cloud account. Both bars completed. Both confirmed. His hands did not shake. That was the thing he noticed most. His hands rested on the desk completely still while the uploads finished, and he understood that the stillness was not the absence of feeling. It was something older and more disciplined. The foundation did not react to pressure. It held or it didn't. His was holding. He opened his contacts and called Renata Osei. She answered on the second ring. He told her in 6 sentences exactly what he had seen and exactly what he had recorded. There was a pause, not the pause of someone surprised, but the pause of a woman rapidly rebuilding her picture of tomorrow from the concrete up. Then Renata said, "Don't go back in that room tonight. Don't let your expression change in the morning. And Marcus, you do not take a single step tomorrow that I haven't cleared." He said, "I know." She said, "Good, I'll be at your door by 7. He set an alarm for 5:15. He lay down on the study couch in his clothes and let himself feel the full geometry of what the last 40 minutes had cost him. Not the anger. Anger was a load he could not afford to carry into tomorrow. The grief, the very specific grief of a man who had built something with care and watched someone decide it was not worth what honesty would have cost them. He gave it exactly 15 minutes. Then he closed his eyes. He slept. He was dressed by 5:45. Charcoal suit. White shirt. His good shoes. He looked in the mirror and looked like a man arriving at the most deliberate day of his life. He texted Kendrick at 6:15. "Best man. Ready for the biggest day. Let's get it." The reply came back in 4 minutes, full of exclamation points and brotherhood. Marcus put his phone in his pocket and drank his coffee at the kitchen window, watching Charlotte come gray and early into the morning. Renata Osei arrived at 7 on the dot. Structured blazer, dark trousers, heels that communicated readiness. She watched the footage twice, listened to the audio with the focused stillness of a woman who processed evidence for a living, then set the phone face down on the kitchen table. Your home. Your device. Voluntary conversation in a space you own. Fully clean. Fully usable. He nodded. She said, "I drafted preliminary documentation at 2 in the morning after your email. Evidence chain. Admissibility framework. It is ready." He told her the plan then. Let the ceremony run all the way to the vows, then play it. Audio through the open microphone, video for the front rows, in front of every person who came believing they were witnessing something true. Renata listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Third row, aisle side." Clear sight lines the whole time. She typed a message without asking him whether she should. Curtis, second row, left side. Full charge. No questions until after. Curtis's reply came back before either of them drew breath. already dressed, on my way. 3 days after the ceremony that wasn't, Curtis Webb called at 7 in the evening. In 11 years of working alongside Curtis, Marcus had learned to sit down before answering when his name appeared at that hour. He sat. He picked up. Curtis said, "I need to show you something. It's about Kendrick's Brookhaven development." Marcus said nothing. He waited. Curtis said, "The load distribution language in Kendrick's structural filings isn't similar to your frameworks. It is your frameworks." He walked Marcus through it, the adaptive sequencing, the below-grade reinforcement approach, the foundation geometry Marcus had developed in his 3rd year with the firm, refined quietly, shared openly with Kendrick across 4 years of conversations. 2 projects had been filed using those frameworks, a residential conversion on Commonwealth Avenue 14 months ago, and the Brookhaven mixed-use development, 3. $7 million, currently 6 weeks into construction on the east side of Charlotte. "I've been doing structural analysis for 13 years, Curtis said. "I know the difference between 2 engineers arriving at the same place independently and 1 engineer using a map that belonged to someone else. This is the second kind." Marcus sat with the phone against his ear and did not speak. Then, quietly, "Send me everything. Every file, every comparison, every timestamp, formatted for court." Curtis said, "Already in your inbox." By Friday, he had read every file. He thought about 4 years of design conversations at dinner, site visits where he had explained his thinking openly and freely. The way you explain your thinking to the man you trust most in the world. He thought about how much he had given, how completely, and how easily. Then, he closed that door. Real power operated in quiet rooms, and the work that happened in quiet rooms on quiet Tuesday nights was what mattered when the weight arrived. He called Renata. She listened without interruption until he stopped. Then she said, "This is not an infidelity case anymore. This is documented intellectual property theft with a construction site as Exhibit A and 18 months of filings as the paper trail. We file the IP complaint concurrent with the dissolution. Same day. He gets hit from 2 directions before he can build a coordinated response to either. He has no idea the IP case is coming." "I'll call Delphine tonight," she said. By the following Wednesday, Delphine Holt had both filings structured. Marcus met with Joanne Strother, the principal at his firm, on Thursday afternoon, laid the documentation on her desk, walked her through it without editorializing, and let the documents carry the argument. Joanne asked 3 questions, all answered by what was already in front of her. She said, "I'll have legal involved by morning. Brookhaven gets flagged today." She reached for her phone before Marcus left the chair. By the time he reached the lobby, the Brookhaven construction site had been flagged for an intellectual property dispute and would be frozen before the close of business. Somewhere across the city, Kendrick Ashby would feel the first tremor of something he had not yet named. That evening, Marcus made 3 calls. The first was to Lorraine Vance, Simone's mother, to ask if she would join him for dinner before the legal proceedings made direct communication complicated. He told her he wanted her to hear certain things from him directly before she heard them from other sources. She said yes without hesitation. The second call was to Kendrick. Marcus told him he wanted one final conversation before attorneys made direct contact inadvisable, private dinner, in person, so Kendrick could hear what was coming from Marcus himself rather than from a filing. Kendrick said, "Yeah, of course, brother." The third call was to Simone. She answered carefully, the voice of a woman who had prepared for this call. He made the same offer. She agreed. He could hear, in the specific quality of her exhale before she spoke, a woman who believed she had just been handed an opening. Neither Kendrick nor Simone knew the other had been invited. Neither knew Lorraine would be there. Neither knew what was in the folder on Marcus's kitchen table. He sat at that table and read through it one final time, every document in the order it would need to land. He checked the structure the way he checked a drawing before a build, looking for the joint that might fail under pressure. He found nothing that needed fixing. The structure was complete. The restaurant was called Provision. A private dining room in South End, accessed through a corridor of dark brick and low directional light, the kind of place where the walls were thick enough and the staff practiced enough that nothing left the room unless someone carried it out. Marcus arrived at 6:50. He always arrived early to rooms that mattered. He walked the perimeter once before sitting, the way he walked any load-bearing space before committing weight to it. He chose the chair against the far wall with a clean view of the entrance. He set the manila folder on the table to his right, placed his palm flat on it for one moment, then moved it beside his plate and left it there. Renata arrived at 6:56, wearing deep navy, clean and deliberate. Curtis came in at 6:58, phone face down on the table, the expression of a man who had done his work and was prepared to be present for what it produced. None of them spoke while they waited. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. Simone arrived first. She came through the entrance at 7:01 and stopped for exactly 3 seconds when she saw the table. Renata on Marcus's left, Curtis on his right, the folder beside his plate. Her eyes moved across the configuration the way the eyes of a practiced event director move across a room she expected to be one thing and found is another. Then she recovered, smoothly the way she recovered from everything, and sat across from Marcus and placed her napkin in her lap. "Marcus," she said. "Simone, thank you for coming." He gave her a quiet, even smile. Kendrick arrived at 7:04. He saw Simone first, and his stride shifted by a fraction, not enough for anyone who hadn't known him 14 years to read. Marcus read it. Kendrick sat, reached for his water glass, said smoothly, "Good to see everybody." He had no idea that the quiet man across the table had spent 3 weeks building a structure specifically designed to bear this exact moment. Lorraine Vance arrived at 7:08. She came through the entrance with the composed posture of a woman who had dressed carefully for a dinner she wasn't entirely certain about. Then she saw her daughter. Then she saw Kendrick Ashby seated at the same table. Something moved behind her eyes, not shock, but something older, the quiet arrival of confirmation for a suspicion she had held a long time and never spoken aloud. She looked at Marcus. He stood. He pulled out the chair beside Simone, not across from her, because Lorraine Vance did not deserve to be positioned as an opponent. She sat. She unfolded her napkin. She did not speak. The first 40 minutes, Marcus conducted with patience and the appearance of ease that costs nothing when you have already done all the hard work in advance. He asked Kendrick about the Brookhaven development. Kendrick described it with the confidence of a man who did not yet know the ground had shifted beneath that project. Marcus asked a precise technical question about the load distribution framework embedded in the structural filings, the kind that could only come from someone who knew exactly what framework was there and where it had originated. Kendrick answered it. Marcus noted every word he used. He asked Simone about a recent campaign. He listened to her clean, controlled summary. He asked Lorraine about her sister in Augusta, and Lorraine's face softened briefly. The genuine softening of a woman who had not expected to be asked something kind. The entrees arrived. The table fell into the quiet of people waiting for something they could not name. Marcus set his fork down. He looked at Lorraine first. "I asked you here because you have always been straight with me," he said. "And because what I need to say deserves to be said to your face before you hear someone else's version of it." Lorraine's hands folded in her lap. Her eyes did not move from his. Simone and Kendrick's relationship did not begin during the engagement. Every word placed with the care of a man who understood that precision in language was the same as precision in engineering. It was the difference between a structure that held and one that failed under weight. It began 16 months ago, a year before our wedding day. That is documented. That is what I needed you to hear from me directly. He let it settle for one breath. Then he turned to Kendrick and opened the folder. He did not pass anything across the table. He placed his hand on the first document and spoke. The Commonwealth Avenue project, filed 14 months ago. He named the framework. He named the date of his original. He described the structural language that appeared in Kendrick's permit filing. He moved to the Brookhaven development. $3, $7 million, currently under construction on the east side of Charlotte. He looked at Kendrick. Or it was. Delphine Holt filed this morning. Construction is frozen as of this afternoon, pending intellectual property investigation. My firm's legal team has flagged the project independently. You will be receiving documentation from 2 directions by Monday morning. Kendrick's face moved through its stages. First, warmth, reflexive, automatic, the oldest machinery he had. "Marcus, man, come on. You know how it goes when 2 people have talked through design ideas together for years. Concepts travel. That's just how development works, Kendrick." The single word stopped him the way a single calculation stops an argument about whether a structure will hold. "I did not bring you here to debate the documentation. That is what attorneys are for." Marcus closed the folder. "I brought you here because 14 years of friendship, even a fraudulent version of it, deserved that you hear this from me first. In a room, not from a filing. That is what I am giving you." Kendrick looked at the closed folder. Something in his face stopped performing and became briefly just a face. Then he looked away. Marcus turned to Simone. "Delphine will contact your attorney Monday. The house has been in my name from the beginning. My assets are structured separately and already protected. This will be efficient, and it will be final." Simone said nothing. Her water glass sat untouched. Marcus looked at Lorraine. "You have always been decent to me. Every time, without exception. I wanted you to hear the truth from someone who respects you. That is the only reason you are here tonight." Lorraine Vance's eyes were bright. Her jaw was set. She nodded once, small, controlled. The nod of a woman absorbing something she cannot put back down and has decided she will carry without complaint. Marcus thanked the table for coming. He stood. Renata stood. Curtis stood. Renata reached into her clutch and placed one business card, face up, precisely centered in the middle of the table where everyone could see it. She did not explain it. She did not look at either Simone or Kendrick when she set it down. They walked out in single file, Marcus first, Renata at his left, Curtis at his right, and the door closed behind them with the soft, definitive sound of a well-built thing settling into its frame. Outside, the Charlotte night was cool and clear. A cab moved down the block. The city hummed its low, constant note. None of them spoke for a moment. Then Curtis said, quietly, "Done." Marcus nodded. They went their separate ways into the night. The consequences arrived the way structural damage always arrives. Quietly at first, in places invisible from the outside, and then everywhere simultaneously. Joanne Strother's legal team notified the Brookhaven investors on a Monday morning. clean, formal correspondence. By Wednesday, the lead investor had retained his own attorney. By Friday, the calls between attorneys had produced the specific silence that meant everyone was repositioning to protect themselves, which meant no one was protecting Kendrick. The second pending development deal collapsed the following week. No announcement. No statement. The industry talked, the way it always talked, and the story that moved through it was simple and thoroughly documented and impossible to argue against. The IP settlement took 4 weeks to finalize. Every framework was identified, attributed, and compensated. A specific clause, clean and completely enforceable, effectively closed to Kendrick's company the entire category of development projects that relied on the structural design language he had been using without permission. He would continue to operate. But the rooms would be smaller, the projects fewer, and the people who knew the industry well enough to know what the settlement meant would know exactly what it meant. The kind of knowledge that follows a man through his career like a shadow that never fully detaches, no matter how far he walks. The dissolution was uncontested. Simone's attorney advised her not to fight the primary terms. She didn't. The house stayed with Marcus. His assets remained separated exactly as he had structured them. 3 weeks before the paperwork was final, Simone requested 15 minutes in person. She came in and sat across from him and looked, Marcus thought, more honest than she had appeared in almost a year. She said, "When you were standing at that door, how long were you there before you left?" He let the question settle. Then he said, "Long enough to know what I had, and what I'd never had." She looked down at the table. He said, "I'm not angry, I'm clear. Those are different things." He stood. He and Renata walked out into the afternoon, and neither of them spoke for half a block. Then Renata said, "You good?" Marcus said, "Getting there." Renata said, "Right answer." That was the last time Marcus Ellison spoke to Simone Vance. 14 months later, the load distribution framework he had spent 7 years developing, properly documented, his name on every page as it had always belonged, anchored a new infrastructure partnership between his firm and a regional development group that had sought them out specifically because of the quality of engineering the IP case had put into the public record. Marcus stood at the groundbreaking on a Tuesday morning with a hard hat and his own drawings, and watched the outline of something true begin to rise from the ground. His work, his name, his mathematics, clean and whole, and going nowhere. He had a new place by the lake, a house he was renovating the same way he had renovated Rosewood, one deliberate choice at a time. He rebuilt the back porch first. Kiln-dried fir, grain running the same direction, gaps even, because the standard did not change based on who was watching. Renata came for dinner twice a month and brought her complete attention, which was one of the most valuable things Marcus had ever been given consistent access to. Curtis had been promoted, passed over twice before, and Marcus had made sure the right people heard the right things about the right engineer. This was what you did for the people who showed up. This was the only economy that actually held. Lorraine Vance sent messages in the fall, and again at the new year, not obligatory ones, the kind written more than once before they were sent. Marcus replied to all of them. Some things survived the collapse of other things, if both people decided they were worth tending. Kendrick still operated. Smaller projects, tighter margins, rooms that once opened readily now required a second conversation. Simone had left Charlotte. She was in Atlanta, doing the kind of starting over that happens when you have exhausted the version of yourself that had stopped working. Marcus did not track her progress. He wished her, from a distance, something resembling clarity. You could not build anything true on peace alone. One evening in early spring, Marcus stood on his new back porch and watched Charlotte hold the last light of a long day. The skyline he had spent 17 years helping to shape, the infrastructure built into the bones of this city. Quietly, doing the work that did not get photographed, but that held everything else up. He thought about the side gate on Rosewood Avenue. About 22 seconds of a car sitting in his driveway. About 4 minutes and 17 seconds of footage, and 11 seconds in the dark, letting himself feel what the night had cost him before he decided what to do with it. He had not argued with what he found. He had not made a sound before he was ready. He had not moved until he knew exactly what he was moving toward. A bridge doesn't argue with the river, it just holds. He raised his glass once toward the skyline, toward the city, toward the work, toward the life that was entirely and verifiably and completely his own. Then he went inside, closed the door, and began. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.